watching and listening to Conscious Evolution Media, shifting global consciousness at consciousevolutionmedia.com.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Kids Talk Foundation, a global nonprofit organization providing youth advocacy, television programming, and training services in the United States, along with comprehensive medical and educational services for the developing world, most recently in Kenya, Africa, where Kids Talk Foundation provides a feeding program, medical care, and educational services to over 1,300 young people each day. Please help our youth and place your donation. Go to www.kidstalk.org. Are you in the entertainment industry? If you answered yes and you want to promote yourself, your passion, and profession, check out Creative Independent Artists magazines at CIAartists.com. Endorsed by Kids Talk Foundation worldwide.
Welcome to Unopened Gifts, the weekly one-hour program dedicated to understanding the human potential that lies within us and the abundant life that lies before us. Inspired by the personal journey of our host, James McPartland.
And that is me. Welcome to this Thursday afternoon edition of Unopened Gifts. I am your host, James McPartland, traveling with you from the great state of California via Colorado to the beautiful city of Long Beach, New York to meet our special guest. But before I introduce Diamond Jeff to you today, I want to thank you for coming to the program. If you've come back with us one more time, I thank you for that. That's a gift to us. And if you're visiting us for the first time, I hope you will see that the purpose of this program is to inspire you, the person who's tuned in, whether you're with us live or you're barreling down the road on a podcast, to inspire you to look inside, recognize the gifts you have, open those gifts this calendar year, give them away. And the way we think that is most apt to happen is through the benefit of storytelling. And the storytelling comes today from our good friend Jeff Goldberg, who joins us from Long Beach, Long Beach, New York. I should know that, very close to where I used to go as a kid, which was, where was that? Jones Beach. And Jeff is a sales expert, a laziness expert. We're going to talk quite a bit about that. A prolific speaker, writer, workshop host, a devoted father, and I would have to say a good friend and a great American. Who's joined us today on this program. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mac. I wish I was in Long Beach, California, because I'm sure it's a little chillier here than it is out west.
But you know, we have, as we talked the other day, we have a little bit of rain here today, and even though it's 60 degrees, we have the umbrellas, the parkers, the Ugg boots are on, right? And people are calling in sick for school and getting off the road. But hey, you and I are where we're supposed to be, and that's in this space, in the field here of opportunity, to talk about you and your gifts. So again, thanks for joining us. And listen, let me ask you something. You didn't wake up on Success Mountain there in New York. There's been quite a journey. I didn't give you due justice in that introduction. Tell us a little bit about the Jeff Goldberg story.
No, I woke up on Success Mountain. I just lucked out. Yeah, that's not the case, Mac. I don't know too many people, at least I have no personal friends that won what I like to call the sperm lottery. And I certainly wasn't one of those. Like so many others, you know, I've struggled during my life. My parents divorced at a very young age. And by the way, I certainly don't have the challenges that so many people do have, especially professional speakers. You know, you meet a lot of people with incredible physical handicaps and mental handicaps. And I didn't have any of that. But my parents divorced at a very young age. It affected me greatly, like it does so many people. We struggled financially for most of my young adult life. I was always taking small, odd jobs to try to help out, support my sister and my mom, do the best I could to help out. But it was certainly a financial challenge. I think the lessons I learned very on about finances were the ones that so many people have learned. Money doesn't grow on trees. Money is scarce. Watch every penny. And those were deeply imprinted into my psyche, and they lasted for much of my life. I'm a college dropout. I, like many people, but unlike some, went to college with absolutely no direction and not having a strong male presence in my life. My mom was my dominant presence, but she was really focused on, you know, staying alive, trying to feed the family, and just stay one step ahead of the bill collector. So I really didn't get much guidance in that way, and I really ended up wasting my time in school. Of course, I can't blame my mom or dad. They did what they had to do, and that was their journey. And I just didn't have a direction. So in my second year, I realized I was simply wasting my time, but I stuck it out for a little while longer and got a part-time job in a furniture store after school in Manhattan. And it turned out that I was learning a heck of a lot more in the business world than I was in the school, and I decided that I was wasting my time and that perhaps eventually I would go back to school when I found my calling in life. Well, my calling showed up for me one day when one of the salesmen didn't show up at work, and my boss said, "Go sell those people." And I looked at him with a blank stare, as I often have on my face, and I said, "I don't know how to sell." And he simply said these words: "Follow them around, smile a lot, take down notes on exactly what they're looking for, come back, I'll give you the price, that's selling." And 40 years later, I'm still selling, except now I train others to sell.
Well, are you still in the furniture business?
I'm sitting on furniture, but no, I've stayed away from retail selling for most of my career, although I did have a brief stint of a couple of years selling women's shoes, which was rather exciting and fun.
Well, Jeff, and I want to touch on something, and I appreciate the backdrop, and what I think is really a testament to what we try to do on this program is let people know that, that we recognize hope's not a course of action. There are actions that need to be taken. We believe, and I believe certainly, by having people come on like yourself who can illustrate the hardships and the challenges, that you have found a way to get off the canvas time and time again. And it is all about how we speak to ourselves and the approach we take to the game and who we surround ourselves with. And, some of us are born with gifts that are recognizable. Some of us maybe aren't so sure or have doubt about what those are or what we're supposed to do. In your case, I think what's interesting is you were kind enough to share you were born with a very high level of intellect. And that doesn't necessarily correlate to yellow brick roads and paths to riches. And I think that'd be really worth sharing. That's a brilliant part of your story. Could you touch on it?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I believe it worked against me. Most of us, I actually don't know if they do it anymore, but anyone my age or around there at one time took some type of intelligence test, some type of IQ test. And teachers never, ever tell you what your IQ is, because they don't want it to, if it's too low, they don't want you to think you're a dope and have that affect your future. And if it's too high, they don't want you to get cocky. I was one of those kids, and by the way, I'm still one of those kids at the age of 57 that loves to be the center of attention. I live for being on the stage. I live for people listening to me, and I was absolutely the traditional class clown. Raising my hand was not part of the bargain in school. I just shouted out whatever was on my mind, and if I could get a laugh, I was going to do that. And my mother, God bless her, spent many, many hours in school hearing two things. One was, why won't Jeff just shut up and pay attention? And the other one is, Jeff's so full of potential. Why won't he live up to it? But on one of those visits, the teacher had prepared for the visit with my mother by laying some materials, and I just happened to see the results of my IQ test, and it turned out I had scored very highly. This was third grade, and at the third grade level, I decided, well, I must be a genius. I'm not doing any more work. I stopped doing homework, except incredibly rarely, and I always managed to kind of skate by. I was never a great student. I didn't enjoy studying, interestingly enough, until I got out of school. That's when I started enjoying studying. But I never enjoyed studying. I didn't want to do homework. I didn't want to be judged. I was pretty arrogant. I thought, well, I'm the smart guy and I know more than anybody. So I think it actually worked against me, having a high intelligence quotient, which really just means your ability to learn. It doesn't mean you're really smart, and it certainly doesn't mean you're going to be successful, because I don't think it hurts that I'm fairly bright, but that's not where I make my money.
Well, as you might imagine, and Steve, our good friend in Colorado, mentioned that there are a lot of stations who are kind enough to tune in with us today to see what gifts that we have to bring in, certainly your gifts. And one has come blasting through here, Jeff, in that it apparently from someone who's been looking at your website as we speak, talking about your sales training business. Question being is, how does somebody with an IQ end up in the sales business? That's an interesting discussion in and of itself, but maybe talk a little bit about evolution and how you spend your time now.
How I spend my, well, the evolution is like this. I found after that one incident that I was actually good at selling. It was almost as if that's what I was meant to do. I believe that good salespeople, actually I believe anybody can be a salesperson, but there are certain characteristics and qualities that make somebody more likely to succeed, like being outgoing rather than being shy, being articulate rather than being a stumbler when you're speaking, genuinely liking to help people rather than coming from I want to make a paycheck or I'm looking to rip people off. And I happen to have all those qualities. I am a fairly good speaker. I really do enjoy helping people. Not that I'm the most altruistic person in the world. I like getting paid for what I do, but I do really get a great sense of satisfaction out of helping others. So those things lent toward me being a good salesperson. In my journey, I've been very fortunate, and one of the things that happened to me, one of my gifts, was that a dear friend of mine, Ron Schmelzer, discovered a self-improvement program which used to be called EST. It's now called the Landmark Forum. And Ron, I believe in our senior year of high school, took that program. And when Ron got back from doing those 2 weekends, the way I like to describe it is being with Ron was like being at a party. And I knew that when I wasn't hanging out with Ron, he was still at the party and I wasn't. I wanted to get to the party. Ron introduced me to the EST training, which really was the start of my personal growth path. I think I took the EST training when I was about 20 or 21. At that time, I had left the furniture store and I was involved in I can't call it a career. It was a job where I was doing things that were, shall we say, less than honest. I was almost a thief. I wasn't robbing people at gunpoint, but I was working in a job where I was selling stereo equipment out of a van, as if it was stolen, but it wasn't. But we were creating the illusion that it was stolen so that people would pay more for it. And when I did some of the work with EST, I discovered that there are a couple of things that help make your life work better. One is always telling the truth, and the other is always keeping your commitments. And I realized that while I wasn't holding a gun to people's heads, I was not living honestly. And I decided that I did not want to live that way. I didn't want to make a living. I didn't want to trick girls into having sex by lying to them. I didn't want to do any of that. And I'm not a big fan of coincidence, but coincidentally, on one of the bulletin boards at the EST location in Midtown New York, somebody was advertising for a salesperson. I figured, what the heck, and I went into the recruiting business. I was awful at it, but the people who were running that firm happened to be 2 EST graduates, and they also had that same philosophy, tell the truth, be honest in your dealings, and they kind of gave me some good tips about sales. It turned out I was not very good in the recruiting business at that point, although interestingly enough, later on I went back into it and was great at it. But I did take a job with Encyclopedia Britannica. And for some of your audience, they may know that as an online encyclopedia, but back then it was physical books. And in that job, I took to it like a duck takes to water. It was just incredible how amazingly successful I was incredibly quickly selling books. I don't think it was just me. It was their amazing training program and their incredible products. And I went from I spent 8 years there, was recruited away from there to become a national sales director at a market research firm, and went from one sales job to another, constantly increasing my skills, constantly reading, constantly studying, until I eventually wound up at a sales training company, a very well-known, well-respected training company called DEI Management Group, where I learned the business of training others and selling training. And I was incredibly fortunate that the owner of the company took a liking to me and gave me an incredible amount of experience training people all over the U.S. in the very first year that I was with them. And it really, that was, for me, a defining moment and another true gift, because it was the job I'd waited for all my life. The truth is, I love making people laugh, and I guess I should have gone into stand-up comedy, which I tried a couple of times, and I realized it was going to take a heck of a lot of work to be really, really good at it. And there's no guarantee, even if you're really good, that you're going to make a substantial living. And I'm a big fan of making money and having money. But I wound up in a career where I do get to stand in front of audiences on an almost daily basis, and I get to say just about whatever I want within human resources approved guidelines. And a lot of what I do and a lot of what makes me different than other people, what I do, is that I do have this background in comedy and local theater, and I'm really good at engaging an audience and making them laugh and be entertained while they're learning. So it was a long journey to get to where I really was meant to be all that time, but as I'm sure you'll agree, everything happens in its own time and for a good reason.
Jeff, indeed it does, and you have lit the torches of curiosity. And so let me ask you, are you okay for some rapid fire, succinct bullet point Q&A? Because I want to get through as many as we can. It seems like you have some curious fans or some people trying to get even with you that are stacking up here in my inbox.
It's probably more of the second one, but shoot.
Let them have it. Yeah, all right. First one. This is from our good friend Pete, and he's coming out of the Big Apple. How did divorce impact you?
Divorce was very tough. I'm not sure. Did I say I was divorced? I don't know. Does Pete know me?
You said your parents.
Oh, my parents were. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about my divorce. I happen to be divorced too.
Right.
My divorce impacted me pretty greatly. My father was mentally ill and actually spent time in institutions. And so living with him was sometimes great and sometimes terrible. But when my parents divorced, which my mother absolutely positively had to do, I missed that male influence in my life. I never developed a love for sports, I think, because of that. I learned, as we all do, by observing our parents, the way to relate to women, and that didn't work out very well since my father was divorced 6 times, my mom 3 times. I kind of almost had this preconceived notion that I was doomed to be divorced, and of course, it eventually did occur. It hasn't stopped me from achieving success, but it certainly has. It's impacted my relationships, certainly.
All right, thank you for that. You ready for the next one? This is from our lovely lady Helen. We're sure she's lovely because she's from the great state of Wyoming. Helen wants to know, if you do have fear, perhaps she believes we all have fear, how do you overcome it, or how do you recommend people face their fears and overcome their fears?
What a great question. Sure, I get afraid sometimes just like anybody else, but I'll take a lesson from the, not the initial S training. They had a program called the Advanced course. And in there I learned that one of the great ways to treat fear is, you know those cartoons that used to have an angel sitting on one shoulder and a devil sitting on the other, and the angel's whispering one thing, the devil's whispering the other one? Well, I was taught that there's nothing wrong with having fear or being afraid. In fact, it's a natural part of life. What is the intelligent thing to do, and the way I face it, is when the devil is whispering in your ear about being afraid, turn to that devil and say, thank you so much for sharing. It's okay, I'm afraid, and I'm going to move forward anyways. And that's what got me to do things like go down a zip line off a mountain. I've jumped out of an airplane at 2.5 miles up. I'm able to get on a stage in front of 100, 500, 5,000 people and deal with that, even though sometimes I'm afraid doing those things. Although, fortunately for me, I don't have stage fright, but jumping out of an airplane, I don't want to be gross at all, but I can tell you that if my feet were dangling out of the plane, getting ready to jump, if I didn't clench my buttocks pretty firmly, there was going to be an accident because it was terrifying. But it was like I said, okay, I'm terrified, but I want this experience, so I'm going to do it even though I'm afraid. That's the way I face fear.
That's what the business of adult undergarments are for, right? Airplane jumping for us mature individuals. All right, we got another one from our good friend Rico. And I guess Rico captured when I talked about the word laziness. And he wants to know, how is it that you are monetizing the concept of laziness?
Well, Rico, I appreciate that. And the first thing I want you to know is that when I say laziness, I don't mean that you can make a ton of money sitting on your couch, getting high or drinking vodka, watching TV and eating pasta all day, doing nothing. What we talk about in our book, and I'm a co-author with the incredible Steve Bookbinder, we want you to leverage your laziness. And what that means is happy and successful people, at least the happiest and most successful people I've found, are those that figure out what they really enjoy and what they're really good at. And they spend the majority, if not all their time doing those things, and they find somebody else to do the things that they either don't enjoy or suck at. That's leveraging your laziness. So I'm not saying be lazy. And by the way, I am a pretty lazy guy. I lean towards being lazy. There's nothing I like better than hanging out on the beach with my iPod and a book and my surfboard. Except that's not the way I get paid. So what I've done in my life is I've set it up so that I own my own business, which means I make my own schedule. And I've set it up so that during this time of year, every client possible, get as much back as I possibly can so that I'm earning, so that when the summer comes, I do my very, very best to never, ever have to work after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so that by 2:30, I'm on the beach, sometimes with a martini and a book and an iPod and a surfboard, and I'm hanging out. That's leveraging your laziness.
Well, you're going to have a lot of visitors this summer, sounds like, for the Martini Surfing International Championships with a master's degree in laziness. I'll be signing up for one of those Landmark Forum unique courses there on the sand with you.
Exactly.
And the questions are rolling in. Now, this one's from Sarah, and I don't know if Sarah knows you or does not, but the question is, if you had a chance to do something over in your life, what would you do over?
There's probably at least two things I would do over. The first one is I would have worked harder in school. I would have found a direction in college and actually studied something hard. Not that it's hurt me by being a college dropout, but I think that I could have learned more stuff, possibly made more connections with people. I wish I would have known the power of connecting with people and networking. You know, I'm not sure that Harvard is any better school than Baruch College, which is a city university college in New York where I went. But I've read articles that say the real advantage to going to a school like Harvard is you get to meet the people that go there. And you make this network of incredible people that you then can leverage later on. So one thing is I probably have worked harder in college and stuck it out and made more connections. The other thing that if I had to do it over, I probably would have gone for that career in comedy. I would have tried a little harder, not given up after 2 times, and really given it my very best shot so that I could stand on the stage every night being a Seinfeld type guy.
All right. So we have this one's coming in from across a long distance. This is Haji. And Haji's question has to do with the perception of sales. Asking if, in your opinion, it still has the tarnish associated when someone says they're in the sales profession, or has the internet helped shift people's perception of sales?
No, wow, great point, Haji. I don't believe it does. I believe that most prospects, most of the people that I go in front of and any salesperson goes in front of, think that all salespeople are, and I don't want to offend anybody, but used car salespeople. I think everybody, that's a gross generalization, but most prospects think that almost all salespeople are there to rip them off, lie to them, cheat to them, stick their hands in the prospect's pocket and pull out those green pieces of paper with pictures of dead presidents on them and put them in their pocket, and that they'll say and do anything in order to do that. The challenge here is that there are some salespeople that are willing to do and say anything. They'll lie, they'll cheat, they'll steal, they'll be underhanded because they got to make a buck. And that tarnishes the reputation and the name of sales for all of us. And I'd have to say that the vast majority of salespeople that I meet are not that underhanded type salesperson. They're not the slick talking presenter that's trying to rip people off. They're genuinely trying to do the right thing, which is come from helping your customer. So in terms of reputation alone, yes, I believe salespeople tend to have a bad reputation, and I try my damnedest to turn that around. And there are a number of LinkedIn discussions on exactly that subject. So there's a number of very committed people working hard to turn around the perception of the general public to what salespeople are. It's a great question.
Excellent. Well, this gentleman's name is Elmer. Elmer owns a manufacturing business, claims he's a financial individual with some engineering skills, and he finds himself, due to limited resources, also having to inspire his sales folks. The question is, are there rules of the road, tools he can use, techniques for him to think about who can help him inspire and lead his sales group?
Sure. Elmer, the first thing I'll tell you is lead by example. It's very difficult to get people to do something that you won't do. And when you show them that you're willing to, make a couple of extra calls or go out on a couple of sales calls after hours or on a weekend, they get inspired. If you act honestly and forthrightly, if you communicate openly, then they learn that that's the way to do it. In terms of motivating individuals, especially in the sales profession, it is a challenge. But here's what I've discovered. While the vast majority of salespeople are motivated by money, in almost every instance, recognition is a very close second, and sometimes it's actually the bigger motivator. So one of the things I've discovered, and this is another conversation that's going on the LinkedIn discussion groups right now, is how do we motivate salespeople? And I have to tell you that motivating by recognition is outstanding. And an example that I used is when I joined Encyclopedia Britannica about a zillion years ago, I was incredibly fortunate that it was just one of those jobs that I took to like a duck takes to water, as I said before. Their training was outstanding. I went through 2 weeks of it, and then they send you out to the field for your first weekend to go sell encyclopedias. And that meant knocking on people's doors. Hi, I'm the encyclopedia guy. Would you like to buy $2,000 worth of books? And of course, our presentation was a little bit more effective than that, but that in essence was what we were doing. Well, Monday morning we had to be in a sales meeting, and they would go around the room, and I think there were about 15 or 17 of us, and the sales manager would say, how many sets did you sell? How many sets did you sell? And it was 2, 3, 0, 1, 5. They got to me, and I had sold 12 sets. And when I said that, the room went silent, and all eyes turned to me. And the manager had a look on his face like, come on, who are you lying to? He said, did you just say you sell 12 sets? And I said, yeah, did I do something wrong? And, you know, there was applause in the room. It was the start of a 8-year career that went kind of skyrocketed. Well, in the first 3 months, I was the top rep in the country out of 2,500. And I got invited to go to Chicago, where the headquarters was, to a manager's meeting, even though I wasn't a manager. And by the way, there's a point to this story, I promise. At this manager's meeting, I went to a cocktail party, and I'm chatting with various people from around the country. And at one point, I'm chatting to a very distinguished-looking woman. And of course, I said, hi, what's your name? And she said, my name is Pat. And I said, oh, nice to meet you, Pat. She said, what's your name? I said, my name is Jeff Goldberg. And I said, hey, Pat, I'm just curious, what office do you work in? And she gave me a look kind of like, what do you mean, what office do I work in? And she said, well, Jeff, I work right here in Chicago. I said, oh, and what do you do for the company? I guess you work in the home office. What do you do? She goes, Jeff, I'm the president of the company.
Whoops.
You know, the red came up into my face, and I said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I guess I should have known that, but I didn't. She goes, it doesn't matter that you didn't know my name, young man. I know yours, and that's all that counts. And I couldn't have felt better. I couldn't have felt more recognized, but it gets even better than that. Shortly after I got back to New York, I'm sitting in my office, and a piece of mail arrives on my desk, and it has the Encyclopedia return address, Encyclopedia Britannica headquarters return address, and it's a letter from Pat Weir, the president of Encyclopedia Britannica, telling me how much she honored and respected my efforts and my abilities, that she thought I was, that the sky was, the opportunities were unlimited for me, and that she was going to be keeping a close eye on me, and that if there was anything she could do to help my career, all I had to do was pick up the phone at any time. And that recognition that Pat Weir, the president of a company which had 2,500 direct salespeople, 250 offices around the country, took the time to probably dictate it to somebody else, but that she took the time to recognize me in that way, meant more than any paycheck she could have put in my pocket, any bonus, any prize I ever won there, any contest. And that letter hung on my wall every day for 8 years, and in almost every other management job that I went to, because it really made me feel great. So Elmer, recognition can be a huge motivator. Leading by example and recognition are two great ones.
Well, Jeff, sounds like you asked a innocuous and safe question. Had you been at happy hour and approached Ms. Weir in a different way and said something different, it might have been a congratulations, thanks for being an employee, you no longer work here letter. It turned out to be fortuitous for you. So that's a great story. And you emphasized there maybe being a close second to money. You know, I think from my perspective, I learned over time and learned the hard way as most lessons come. You know, everybody's looking for affirmation. It's almost as if we've all got a neon light on our head that says, validate me, right? We know that I'm loved, I measure up, I'm making a difference, and I don't care what somebody's label is on their business card. We all have that need for identification and recognition of that we're doing something meaningful. So you just talked about how you're walking on air from that And that's a powerful lesson for everybody in Elmer who's not fielded or, let's say, trained in the area of sales. That's something any of us can do. But you now have another. You have got a lot of friends here. Let's see if you know this one. This gentleman is Sully, the Sultan of Sales, he calls himself. So you met your nemesis, right? Your arch enemy, or your arch supporter, or your archangel. Anyway.
Or all three.
Or all three. I would go check the other rooms and see if somebody's on the line. So this question, and I have to read into this one, because the question is, from the sales perspective, what comes first, person or product? And maybe that is, are you selling yourself or you're selling the product? I'm reading into that. That's all I have to go on. But let's assume it's what comes first, selling yourself or selling the product?
Good enough. Another good question. Before I answer that one, I just want to give you one more point. I'll bet you'll be able to relate to this, because I know, like me, you're a professional speaker. I often jokingly say, don't tell my clients, but I would pay them to let me do what I do. For me, when I'm giving a speech, I love that I'm giving content, and I love that I'm helping people, and I love that I see that they're taking notes and they're asking questions, and all that's great. But the moment when I finish and they applaud, and then they come up and shake my hand and tell me what a good job I did, it's almost like the paycheck was unnecessary. Now again, if you're a potential client, I still want to get paid. But man, you know what I'm talking about, Mac? It's like when they shake your hand and say, thank you so much, what you said really rang true for me. It's like, it's what I live for.
And it's reinforcing, right? It puts more fuel in the jet tank to continue down the path.
Makes you want to go out and do it again.
Yeah, it makes those lights when you're away from your family or traveling, all that more sort of understandable and appreciative if you just get to throw a few starfish back in, right? All right, anyway, so
exactly right. So are you selling the product, or are you selling the person first? You're selling the person. Here's the thing, and I often say that I don't like to use cliches, except I seem to use a lot of them, so I guess I do like to use cliches. But one sales cliche for sure is that people buy from people that they like and people that they trust. And my feeling is this: unless you're selling something that they can't get anywhere else, which that's not the case for me, and not the case in most businesses, unless they can't get what you have anywhere else, people will actually go out of their way to not do business with you unless they like you first and trust you first. So unless you can develop that rapport, because that's what we usually call it in sales, that initial part of the meeting is rapport building, unless you can get them to start to like you and begin to trust you, I don't care what your product or service is, you're not going to get anywhere, because people do have that built-in fear of being taken advantage of by a slick salesperson or an underhanded salesperson. So we have to break down that barrier. In fact, I always tell audiences that when you go on a sales call, there's a brick wall built between you and the person who you want to sell to. And they've built it up pretty strong. You can probably just see them from the neck up over the wall. And they put a sign on your side of the wall that you can read as soon as you walk in that says, I'm not buying anything, and I'm sure not buying it today. So unless if you do what the typical salesperson does, and by the way, my advice to salespeople is always do the opposite of what the typical salesperson does. In fact, I always relate it to the Seinfeld episode where George, the perennial loser, figured out that if everything he does is wrong, all he has to do is the opposite of what he thinks he should do, and then he'll be a success. And then, if you remember in that episode, he got a brand new good-looking girlfriend, and he got a new job, and he moved out of his parents' house. So you want to do the opposite of what the typical salesperson does, and what the typical salesperson does on a sales call is this. Walk in, shake hands, say hi, ask a few stupid questions which don't make any sense whatsoever, and they don't care about the answers, but they're just looking to get to the most important part in their mind of the sales process, which is the presentation. And then they throw up all over the customer's shoes. Come in with what's called a product dump. Let me tell you all about my company and our products and how great we are. Blah. And when you do that, you can literally watch the prospect's eyes glaze over. In fact, I always say they leave the room. They're still sitting there physically, but they've mentally left the room, and they're just waiting for the moment when they can actually kick you out of their office. If you take the time and get to know somebody a little bit first, then you've got a shot at creating a relationship that you can then nurture and then hopefully get a sale. And that's not an easy thing to do. I have a particular methodology that I teach for doing that, but I'm going to say absolutely person first, product second.
So Jeff, I'm going to hold the horses here on the questions, let me ask you something, because having a feeling for our audience, viewers, and our listeners, let's expand this subject in and around sales, if I may, to the aspect of those that don't necessarily have sales on their title or their business card, whatever you want to call it, but yet, from my perspective, or maybe to tee this up for you, is, some aspect of sales is influence, and whether that's a teacher imparting knowledge, a parent inspiring a child, whether that's the accounting people trying to get some folks within their organization to give documents back, whether that's a product development individual trying to promote what they have to their organization. To some degree, all of us have sales responsibilities, right? Maybe it's not quota driven, but it's influence driven. Can you touch on how what you bring to the market touches the various sort of positions that we all play in the game of life?
Yeah, and I was pointing to my nose because you're on the nose, my friend. Everyone's in sales. Whether your title is sales or not, everyone's in sales in every organization and in life. The greatest salespeople are kids. I've got 3 young children. I've got an 11-year-old and twins that are 10. And man, they are the greatest salesperson people in the world, and they're sure the best negotiators. If you're trying to ask a guy or a gal out for a date, you're selling. If you're trying to influence people in any way, shape, or form, you are selling. You're selling your ideas, you're selling your attitudes, you're selling your thoughts. And I just happen to work in an industry where I'm selling services or products, and that's what a professional salesperson does. But in any organization, I suggest everybody should consider themselves being in sales, from the janitor up to the CEO. I say the receptionist who answers the phone is in sales. We're all selling all the time. So having some knowledge of sales methodology, I think, is useful for everyone. Not that you want to take advantage of people with sales techniques, but understanding, I'll call it the right way to sell. And by the way I teach is only one right way. There's lots and lots of people who teach various methodologies. Everybody needs to understand how to sell and also why people buy. I think it's as important to understand why people do the things they do. And in fact, I believe that sales is mostly psychology. Excuse me.
Oh, excellent. So, Eddie, and he nicknames himself Fast Eddie. I don't know if that's driving, selling, or consuming beverages. But nonetheless, Eddie's question has to do with mentors. Your feeling about mentors, and have you assembled your own all-mentor team?
Yeah, I've been blessed. We're talking about unopened gifts. I was incredibly blessed to have people like Pat Weir, the president of Encyclopedia Britannica, who I could call on when I needed to. I was also blessed that my first manager at Britannica was this crazy, screaming Italian guy who was just, and by the way, I told you my dad was mentally ill. One of the things the ways that expressed himself was he was bipolar. He was sweet like sugar one second, he'd be screaming in your face the next second. And at a very young age, that certainly influenced me and impacted me. And I don't deal well with people when their voices get loud. And this guy, Ted, this boss of mine, he'd just scream at you out of nowhere. But the beautiful thing about Ted was, as soon as he was done screaming, he'd walk over to you with a big smile on his face, and he'd put his arms around you. It was a while ago when human resources wouldn't sue him for that. And he'd say, I love you, kid. And I was very fortunate to have people like Ted as a mentor, people like Mel Neary, who was my next manager, and a great guy who became a great friend. I found that mentors can be an invaluable part of your growth, and I've sought out people who know how to do what I do. It kind of goes with Tony Robbins and NLP. You can do anything that anybody else can do as long as you study it and figure out how to do what they're doing. So I've always taken the thought that if I can find somebody who's being successful at what I want to do and learn from them, I'm way ahead of the game. And I think that's part of leveraging your laziness too. Why would you want to reinvent the wheel if somebody already knows how to do it? And I'm not saying there's not a place for creativity and breakthroughs. All that stuff is important. But in terms of selling, while occasionally there's a breakthrough, there are certain things that just work. So I've been blessed to find people that can help me. And I'm blessed. My co-author is one of my mentors. He was my mentor, and certainly in the speaking and training business. And he's a guy I call all the time for strategy. On the flip side, he calls me for motivation, because one of my coaching gifts is that I'm able to talk to people and get them to open up and get them to see, kind of like you, I believe, Mac, that there is a silver line to what you're going through right now, and there are ways you can get out of it. And often they're right in front of your nose, but you just can't see them. And I also find quite often it's not a huge step that you have to take. It's just that little step, and often it's just getting started. I'm a big fan of being in action.
Nice. Well, talk about this. It's Lucinda, who's written in about education, personal growth, and development. The question specifically is how you stay on top of your game and the amount of time you spend on sharpening your saw, as written here, or continuing your own education to provide value to your clients.
The answer is constant. Now, I'm a person, is it Lucinda?
Yes.
Lucinda, I'm a person who gets paid to train other people how to sell. But sitting here on my desk, I'm reaching over, are 2 books I'm reading right now about selling. This one was given to me, sorry for the glare there, just the other day. It's called To Sell is Human. I've only read about the first 30 pages, but I can see it's brilliant. This one I'm about halfway through. It's called The Challenger Sale. And for anybody who's in sales in your audience, Mac, I suggest they pick this one up immediately. The essence of it is a large survey and a study were done, and they came up with the idea, and I agree, that there are 5 different types of salespeople. And they actually commissioned this study when the economy turned sour to see if anybody in sales was succeeding. And it turned out that of the 5 different types of salespeople, there's one type of salesperson that was succeeding in a down economy where everybody else was failing. But the interesting thing that they found was not only does this challenger type of salesperson succeed in a down economy, the challenger salesperson far excels at selling in any economy. So I'm constantly studying, Lucinda, and I'm always looking for that new technique, that new thing that just may transform my business and allow me to help others to transform their sales career.
Nice. Interesting. All right, so I don't know if this one comes from a family member, your own children, or your co-author. This one is simple yet complicated. This one is, Jeff, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I have a simple answer. I'm never going to grow up. I'm a 57-year-old, 17-year-old, which is really lucky for me because I have very young children. I started my family very late in life. So it's lucky for me that I don't want to grow up because we like the same cartoons, we like the same movies, we like to go roller skating, we like to do all kinds of great stuff together. And if you want a more serious answer than that, I'm doing exactly what I love doing. I don't think there's anything I'd rather be doing unless I could, snap my fingers and be a highly paid stand-up comedian, maybe a rock star. I've always dreamed of standing in front of the Madison Square Garden, playing like Eric Clapton, except I certainly didn't put in the work that was going to take. So I wake up every morning thanking the universe for allowing me to play every day and get paid for it. And I think that's part of leveraging your laziness too. And again, Mac, I'll bet you can relate to this. As a professional speaker, one of the characteristics that makes a better speaker as opposed to a less good speaker is you have to come off with a lot of confidence. You have to act like you know what you're talking about, even if you don't. Now, I don't speak on any topics that I don't know about, but having that confidence on the stage and giving off that aura of confidence to an audience means that quite often you get asked questions about areas that you have no expertise in. And one of the questions I get asked quite often is, what should I do next in my career? Now, I'm not a guidance counselor and I'm not a career counselor, but I always give people the very same piece of advice, and it's this. Figure out what you would do if the money didn't matter. If you had plenty of money, what would you be doing? And when you figure that one out, find a way to make money doing that. I've wound up in a career where I'm doing exactly what I want to do. I'm standing on a stage, talking to people, helping them make more money, helping them improve their skills. And amazingly, I get paid to do that. So when I grow up, I want to be me. If not, then I want to be my dog.
Well, at least the good news is you get to spend the night with yourself tonight. All right, I'm going to squeeze in one more question, and I guess this has to do with, looks like unique selling proposition, distinguishing yourself. This is for a gentleman who's building out his consulting business, wants to know how you separate yourself from the masses. in terms of what you bring to market? Perhaps many people can say similar things. The question is it books? Is it speaking? Is it, how do you, I guess the fundamental question is, how do you get yourself to stand out from the rest of the pack?
Yeah, and that's a great question too, and that's something I certainly cover when I'm talking with salespeople. Having a USP, a unique selling proposition, or being able to clearly and succinctly explain to people what makes you different, what makes you better, why do people do business with me, is crucial. Because look, in my field, in the sales training field, there's, I actually haven't looked it up, but I'll bet there's 10,000 or more in the U.S. alone. I know right here on Long Island, there's tons and tons of people doing what I do, some more successfully than others. It seems like about 50% of the salespeople that lost their jobs in the down economy decided, well, I can't do it, so I'll teach it. So there's a lot of people. So I'm often asked by my prospects, well, what makes you different? You know, why should I hire you as opposed to the 15 other guys? And I always say the same thing, and I believe we talked about this just a little bit at the beginning of your show. I have a background in theater and stand-up comedy, and what that does is it makes me different. See, I've got good content, and lots of people have good content, but we've all been in seminars or workshops or attended speeches where even though the information was useful, you wanted to poke your own ears out so that you didn't have to hear the person on the stage droning on anymore because they didn't know how to speak. That's not going to be the case with me. I promise you that when I'm standing in front of an audience, they're engaged. I'm having a good time. They're having a good time. We're both, it's like a marriage. We're on fire. So yes, it's crucial that you find what your unique selling proposition is. Having a book can absolutely make a difference. In fact, I just lost a big deal, which I very much wanted to get because I knew I could really do a great job for this company. And it was going to be a substantial paycheck. And the guy who runs the company called me up and said, "Hey, Jeff, I hope this makes you feel good. You came in second." And you know, I'm on my cell phone, so you can't see me, but the look on my face was kind of like, "What?" And I said, "I'm not sure why I should feel good about second." He goes, "Well, there were 6 of you we were considering, and we completely got rid of the other 2, but you came in second." And of course, the question for me was, what made you choose the other guy? And his answer was, well, you had about equal experience, except he wrote a book on that particular subject. The particular subject happened to be inside sales. Now, it just turns out I have extensive experience hiring, training, mentoring, coaching, and developing inside salespeople. I built one team from 3 people when I got there up to 45 people when I left, turned around a failing conference division, all with inside salespeople. So I'm highly, highly experienced. But what made the difference is the book. So his unique selling proposition that won him this large contract instead of me was he handed over a book as a gift when he walked in the door. I think that's a great way to distinguish yourself. And anybody who's trying to sell anything had better give serious thought to what is your USP. Because if you can't differentiate yourself from the competitors in your market, it's going to come down to price. And that's not what you want it to be about.
Great point and great real-time example for us, and humility on your part to talk about being first one to come in behind the leader in that transaction. So as time magically goes racing by in this gift-giving experience, let's talk about how people can track you down, website, find your book, find out more about what you're doing, perhaps hear you speak, give us access to the world of Jeff Goldberg and Associates.
Sure. The book that we've been talking about, Leverage Your Laziness, is due to be published by Sound Wisdom Publishing in May or June, so you can't get that yet. If you're interested in my first book, it's called How to Be Your Own Coach. We're in love with this book. It was written in comic book workbook format. It's full color. It's only 30 pages long, but it's as if you hired me or my associate Steve to be your coach. And it leads you through the 6 questions we would ask you if you actually paid us to be your coach, so that you can coach yourself to success. And I think I shared with you the other day, Mac, that we wrote this book when my associate Steve was training to swim the English Channel. We based how to coach yourself to success on what he was doing. That one you can find on Amazon, or you can go directly to the publishers. I believe it's BeYourOwnCoach.com, leaving out the E after B, so it's BYOUR-owncoach.com. If you're interested in me for speeches, training, anything like that, my website is JG, like Jeff Goldberg, JG Sales, SALES Pro, PRO.com. And there's all kinds of information about what I do on there. My phone number, and people are welcome to call me directly, is 516-608-4136. And I welcome emails from your audience. It's jeff@jgsalespro.com, or you can go to my website and email me that way. And here's an invitation to your audience, Jim. And I don't make invitations lightly. I think there's two types of invitations. One is, I live in Long Beach, and if any of you guys are ever in Long Beach, come knock on my door. We'll have some cocktails, we'll walk down to the beach and have a good time. But if most of your audience knocked on my door, they'd probably hear the shotgun pumping and be whispering to the kids, "Hey, be quiet, act like you're not here." That's not the type of invitation I'm talking about. If your audience members have questions about sales, something that they're working on that they'd like a little coaching on, they're welcome to email me or call me, and I'll be glad to give them some time. Now, obviously, I get paid for coaching, so I can't spend hours and hours each week with everybody who calls. But if somebody has a quick question, I'm happy to help out. 'Cause like you, I'm a big believer that when you give, you get back, and what goes around comes around. And I just keep giving, and I know that's one of the reasons that I'm so blessed.
Well, you are the architect of how one throws boomerangs out in the world, and it ultimately comes back. You're never really sure from what direction. So your generosity and the gifts that you offer to all of us today live, and to the folks who want to carry on this conversation, it's with much gratitude that I say thank you for that. And Jeff, you have been an absolute gift for those looking for some insight and some inspiration on how to overcome an obstacle and make this year the year that they step outside of maybe his history, stretch the comfort zone a little bit, and into the future that they have been dreaming about, thinking about, praying about, or hoping for. And there's much any of us need is a method, a tool, a guiding light, a coach, an angel, somebody who's been down that road before. So thanks for blazing the trail, or illuminating for us by telling your side of the story. Jeff, you have given us plenty of gifts to open today. Thank you for that.
It's my pleasure. If I could take just 10 seconds, I consider meeting you, and I don't believe anything happens by accident or coincidence, a gift for me, and I honor and appreciate the time you've given me today, and I really enjoyed it. I can't believe an hour went by.
All right, so then I get to ask you one question, one more before we sign off. Ravens or 49ers?
I'm not a sports fan.
Oh, that's right, you told me that. So you just can answer the question and say yes.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Who are you rooting for?
I'm just rooting for it, because as we talked about, both having young children, a chance to see some of it, right? If it doesn't have Barney or, Legos associated with it. And, entertainment, and that's what's most important, And, hey, if I don't even get to see it, I'll read about it in the newspaper. That's okay. As long as it's fun. And listen, like it's been today to spend time with you, Jeff. It's been a gift. It's been fun. Clearly, you're professional, your training, your history, your background served you well, served our guests who have come onto the program today. So again, Jeff, thank you.
My pleasure, Matt.
All right, and for all of you that tuned in, thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for spending time on the Jeff Goldberg Express today. Accept his generous offer of respect, of the gift, and reaching out to Jeff. That was very kind of him, and I say that with careful caution and respect to that generous offer. And come back to us next week about 5 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock for the next edition of Unopened Gifts. I'm your host, James McPartland, and I thank you again for being with us. It's been a gift for me. See you next week.
Today's podcast is brought to you by ObesityHotline.com, the silent killer, providing support and encouragement in the prevention of this rising epidemic. Featuring the Body by Vi Challenge. Is there a quick answer to the question? Go to www.ObesityHotline.com. You're watching and listening to Conscious Evolution Media, shifting global consciousness at ConsciousEvolutionMedia.com.